something like in our case, when we wrote down exactly what we wanted, when it becomes that real to you that you can see it. I mean, we could visualize what this store looked like before we even had it. Like it was so real to us. It's like you're willing to put ego aside or whatever else you have to do in order to see it come to fruition. Regardless of whether I won the essay competition, that store was too real for me when I got to imagine it. For me to just put myself at it before it and say, well, I'm not gonna reach out. I'm not gonna do this anymore because they didn't award it to me. It's like, no, I'll find a way to get this created now because I believe it's worth it and I can't give up on it. So anyway.
From Harold Washington to Harold's Chicken and everything in between and beyond, SoCHiology is the exploration of Chicago culture, history, legends, stories, and fiction through a myriad of discussions with Chicagoans themselves. Two black men from the Southside of Chicago dared to boldly go where no black Chicagoan had gone before, and that's to own a comic book store. Captain Marcell Kirk and Michael Superman DeDon Davis are the co-owners of Blerds Underground, which is not only the only black-owned comic book store in Chicago, but it's the only black-owned comic book store in the entire Midwest. On this episode of SoCHiology, Mike and Marcell shared their zeal for comics, but not only that, how it's their mission to make comics more accessible to the South and West Side of Chicago and black people across the nation. So without further ado, let's dive right into that story.
You know, when y'all first fell in love with comics, like before we even get to the comic book store, you know, let's just take it way back when, you know, y'all kids, teenagers. When did y'all fall in love with comics, comic books, and superheroes, the whole 9 yards?
So you want to
start? I think my medium was like, I guess fall in love with like the whole idea of it was the X-Men cartoon. Like I will always pick up like some comics in. I remember on 79th, Dan Ryan, me and my sister used to catch the bus, and it was you know, one of them little twirly joints. They used to sell like candy and all that stuff, but they had like comic books, like very basic, maybe like 8 to 12 selection, but them joints was $1.25. And so I was watching the X-Men cartoon. I saw X-Men comic book. I saw Wolverine on the cover, and I was like, man, let me go ahead and check this out. And at the time, you know what I'm saying, I ain't number 6. I'm kind of just flipping through. I'm loving like the pictures because I used to draw a lot. And then you start like reading the stories, and then you start understanding like, man, it's a continuation. It's a continuation to like these stories. So like my fall in love with it was just off the creativity, the artwork. And then later on as I mature, for sure, like the storyline, but I wanted to mimic the artist, right? Like, so I look at a picture and I try to draw in their style until like I develop my own. But yeah, that was my intro / falling in love with it, was creativity, I think, was what I admired the most. And that dang on cartoon was amazing.
It was. Huh? Yeah, mine is similar to Sales, just a little different. I mean, obviously, I think any child of the late 80s, early 90s was impacted by X-Men the animated series, Batman the animated series, or Spider-Man. Like those cartoons on Fox back in the day, that set the tone for a lot of us to get into the comics and learn more about the characters. But when I was a kid, for me, Superman, Christopher Reeves, the movie, the motion picture, was like the biggest film for me ever. Like I grew up rocking Superman capes, running around the house trying to fly, and those movies from that way back when, like those were my entry to like those characters. And then it led into comics later because my mom actually discovered about 2nd or 3rd grade, sometime early, that I was having difficulty reading and keeping up with class, trying to read. And so traditional stories just weren't doing it for me. And she tried something that she was into. My mother's a big fan of comics, and she's like, I got to find a way to get him to actually read. So she took the characters that I was running around the house trying to imitate and took me to a comic book store and introduced me to my first Superman comics. And that, to me, started my love for the actual comics, because I get so into the art and the story that I didn't even realize how much I was reading, until it was getting to the point where I'm walking out the comic book store with fat stacks of books, like not even realizing my mom's sneak approach of like, I'm going to get this boy to read and up his vocabulary, whether it's in a written book or in a comic. And eventually it just, became something that I grew into more. I wasn't like Sale. I didn't have the ability to draw. I could just appreciate the art, appreciate the storylines. And that's how I got to read.
Okay. Yeah, so and I didn't properly introduce y'all. So this is Captain Marcell Kirk and Michael Don Davis. They are the owners of Blerds Underground in LaGrange, Illinois, which is why we're having this conversation, and that's why we had to go way back to where it started, So Sale, you fell in love with the illustration end of it, just the visuals. Whereas Mike, it was really like an educational tool for you, so you can basically get to the level where you need to be, what I'm saying, as far as like articulating words and things like that. And it's very noble that your mom, who was a comic book fan, she used that. So like that was like a creative way of like educating even before like this whole social media world we live in where, so many different creative ways what kids can learn nowadays. So that's definitely what's up, man. So this is how y'all fell in love with comics. And y'all met in high school, correct?
Yes.
So how did that first encounter go when the Don met the captain? How did that go?
Mike, I'm almost apprehensive to let Mike answer this first.
I know why. Go ahead.
Like how do we? All right, so me and Mike was into the same stuff. Like I think Mike can attest to this. Like I was cool. I did like just different crews. Of course I had my main, but like I move around. I'd be in like movie review club or something like that. Like I was just like that type of dude. Mike, I'm trying to see when me and him got close because we was always cool.
Okay.
So I'm trying to give you like when did we get
like when did it click? Like
when did it click? So Mike he was very, very crafty with IT computer stuff. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I remember like when you created this damn RPG game that he was on my butt about it. Like he was like, this your character, this what you can do with it, yada yada. So we got to chopping it up a lot off of that. But to be honest, like that was like the start of it. But then Mike would do like some real cool stuff. Like I remember he helped me paint my mother hallway. I remember when we figured out that we could be roommates at Weston. Like we really start digging into each other in different ways, but we was always cool. But like when that click came in was when we kind of could foresee like, we rock off each other this way, but we got some common interests. But then I come to his crib, help him with something, or get him some advice on something, or he'll come to my crib, and like this fool was putting paint to the wall, what I mean? I was like, all right, what I mean? Like, thanks. I'm talking about, we didn't know what the hell we was doing. Paint just all over. Like, I'm talking about decent clothes. We didn't change or nothing.
Man.
And so I think like the click part was just like what we were willing to do for each other in terms of just being supportive. I think but I can't give you like the next. I just knew like there was a lot of geeky stuff that we connected on, but when it clicked, like this, my man's was like you at my crib type stuff, and you talking to my mother, and those interactions was very important for me.
Yep. No, to echo that, is exactly right, man. We were cool in high school. I think our friendship evolved like over the 4 years. We probably got our closest at the last year when we were getting ready to graduate. We found out we were going to the same college and started discussing like being potential roommates and that sort of thing. But to this point, I remember like you just find your people. You find you because back then being a blurred, a nerd, whatever you want to call it,
right? It wasn't popular.
It wasn't fashionable, right? It wasn't cool. Like it was like you had to know who was into it to have certain conversations, and you didn't want them heard by other people. But it was like Sale was that dude I knew I could talk Dragon Ball Z. I could come to him. We could debate Gohan being a whack character, not like he was constantly defensive of Gohan, and I just learned that like the stuff that I was into, like building closet RPGs. Like I was online on message boards creating RPGs. That was always my thing. Yeah. I could get Marcell roped into that because I knew he had the same fantasy mind that I did. So we knew we had those interests. I think where we started to become closer is once, like you said, once we start hanging out, going to each other's houses and figuring out that like aside from art form, like we were actually just really cool. Like we both, you know, I mean, just took care of, you know, family and friends in the same way. And so it was like this natural, like coming together. At some point, we just decided, yo, you my guy. we want to come together.
Like we locked in at this point. We locked in. We friends, and it's a bonus that we both share love for comics.
Yeah.
So like, how was those conversations? I'm sure y'all was probably like up all night just talking about some, you know, story arcs, you know, different issues. Like, you know, I'm sure like that was very exciting and enthusiastic. You know, being two Blerds back in that day, like you said, it wasn't popular like it was back then. So
yeah, but even to that point, like for me, I didn't like, I know people's like closet, like Blerds, and you know, like people was kind of like low key. That ain't something like you'll do in like front of a girl you interested in.
Yeah.
But for me, like I just did not care, bro. Like I'm talking about, I would draw that stuff out, I would talk about it. And I think that's what, like, that's how Mike knew, because he just knew, like he knew, because I mean, I gotta be
no shame in your game.
Yeah, it was like I gotta be myself. Like everybody I dealt with from any circle knew, like, yo, I was about that life in terms of, you know, anything blerdom, like I rock with it. And so yeah, like Mike, he could pick me out of the lineup. You know what I mean? I wasn't like rocking the stuff or nothing, but I would talk about it in any circle I hear, even an inkling, somebody say, man, you gonna do that Kamehameha? Like, bro, you know what I'm saying? Like, because it's like people say like subtle stuff. See like, man, you better stop playing. But yeah, for sure.
No doubt.
And you know, it's kind of like, you know, RDC World, shout out to them. You know, they are very huge nowadays, and it just seems like, you know, I ain't gonna say ahead of the wave because y'all was a different time anyway. Y'all was a different generation. They're younger than y'all, but it's like y'all was pretty much on that same wave though. Like, you know, and again, like individuals like yourselves kind of laid the groundwork, because I don't think being a blurred black nerd, you know, would be as popular as it is today if it wasn't for a lot of people like you guys that was like heavy into that, you know, that world. You know, like me personally, I love comic books, but I'm not gonna say I was a blurred, not because, you know, I thought it was weird, but it's just I never was that deep in it though. You know, like I would like just watch a couple cartoons here and there, but I wasn't collecting the issues, the volumes, none of that. My cousins would do stuff like that. Y'all would do stuff like that. And it's like, you know, y'all was doing this in 2003, 4, 5, and 6. Now we are 2023, and everybody want to be a blur. Now all of a sudden, everybody, you know, everybody popular. Everybody want to watch anime. Everybody want to, you know, do this. Everybody love Marvel, XYZ. You know, so yeah. Okay, so cool. So that's how the friendship started. So like as we progressed through the years, at what point did y'all start to talk about, you know what, we should have our own comic book store? You know, at what point did those conversations start?
Man, so you mind if I take that one? So it's weird. We still, and I've had like conversations about all sorts of businesses and different things we want to do. And Sel will tell you, I've had like a million, we could do this, we could do that. It's like business ideas over the years. And it's weird, we never, of all the things we used to discuss, the idea of becoming a comic book store owner, I don't think ever came up until just a few years ago, because it was always something we loved, but we never saw ourselves as wanting to get into the business of it. And I don't know why that spark never happened naturally, but actually what ended up happening is one day I'm watching the news, and there's a news story about this guy who owns a comic book store. He owned 3, and there was a store near me in Oak Lawn that he didn't have the time, you know, to really invest in anymore. So instead of just closing it, he was going to do a giveaway and have people write an essay saying what would their ideal comic book store be. And the winning essay would just get the comic book store from him. And I'm thinking, like, first thing in my mind is like, this is scam shit. Like, there's no way the Southside of me couldn't compute somebody who's giving away a perfectly good business. I'm like,
right. Yeah, because where we come from, that.
Right. Like, my man scamming somebody. I'm like, it ain't gonna be me. I'm laughing about it. I wasn't even taking it seriously. My wife is the one that looked at it and was like, no, this looks legit to me. As a matter of fact, she's like, that's all you and your little friends do anyway. It's talking about comics. She's like, right. She's like, I dare you to write the essay for it. And so I'm like, all right, you know how it is when somebody dare you to do something. I'm like, all right, bet. My wife know how to motivate me. So I go ahead and I start writing an essay, and I tell Marcell about it. And he's excited. He writes an essay, and we submit the essays. neither one of us wanted. But it was something that, like, once we started investing into the essay and like really imagining what a store would look like in our image, then it became almost impossible for us to not see ourselves as owners of the store. So like even during the pandemic, when the world shut down, and I mean, if there was any industry that was already on life support that you just thought would just end, it would be comic book stores. It was like we never abandoned the idea even then that we could be owners, because we always felt that there will always be a need for these books and that representation matters. That we never, Marcell and I had never walked into a Black-owned comic book store ever. And once we realized that we could make history by doing this, in addition to just doing it for the love, it was like, yo, we got to find an avenue to make this work. So that's how I remember it. But still, you'd add any more context to that?
I definitely agree with you. Like Mike, like for real, be like the brainchild. Like, yo, let's let's try this, let's try that, right? I think to answer your question, like, what did we think that we was capable, or that this was something for us? I think it really came down to us being in a position where we was like comfortable in our first careers too. Like I feel like that part, like kind of mastering our crafts and the careers that we kind of started in. I know for me, like mine is a passion. However, it's a lot of things you can be passionate about. You don't have to be passionate about just one, path. And I feel like once we got comfortable enough and settled, whether it was family and things like that, we start really digging into it. We always talked about it, but we start like digging into different avenues to express on or invest in our passions. And I would say that came like late 20s for us, where we kind of started chatting about it, and early 30s where we start kind of, going from one thing to another into like that thing. But the one thing that never stopped with us, we always made connections with people. Like I feel like that was the blessing within our natural skill set and our natural passion, like connecting with people that yielded the results of, damn, stuff just lined up this way. And yeah, I think it came down to that. So yeah, I say early 30s, we started that path.
They say the 30s is like when you really find yourself anyway. At least I can attest to that personally. I feel like I'm just now settling into my career and, the lane that's been paved out for me. So that definitely makes sense. And, two Black men from the Southside of Chicago owning a comic book store isn't something that you hear every day. Honestly, I don't think nobody has heard it until y'all did it. So, both of y'all wrote these essays, both y'all got degrees, and neither one of y'all won. So you would think the story ends there, but what happened after the essay competition, after that blew over?
Yeah, so what happened, I became a professional stalker like most. It was like once I found out that we didn't get the store, I figured, well, that's okay. I'm still gonna reach out to the guy who was gonna give it away in the first place, and he gonna be my new best friend. Like I'm gonna find out how to get in this business one way or the other, because I couldn't give up on the ideas, neither could Marcell. So I slid in them DMs, man. I hit the guy up. I'm like, hey, I know I didn't get your store, but I love to just sit down, buy you coffee, and talk to you about how we can get involved in this, because we at some point want to be owners. And so I was surprised when he reached back out, and we started a friendship. His name was Carmelo Chimera, and it just turned into something where he'd meet with Marcell and I. We'd come up with ideas, and there's a lot of things to this project that we put into phases, because some of what we want to do with this project has to do with the community and trying to get art and literacy education to kids on the South Side. So much so that when we were talking to him about the idea for the business, when we would talk about it, we would talk about intentionally having it in a Black and brown community, like Southside Chicago. That's where we're from. That's where we want to make these comics accessible too, right? And so the guy eventually went from just giving away one of his stores to closing all of them. And he was getting ready to close his last store in LaGrange until we were just sitting at dinner one night and having a conversation about it. And at first I just asked him, could we work it a little bit just to learn how the business operates and, the point of sale system. And finally just dawned on all of us sitting at it, like, no, we maybe we should buy the store instead. Like maybe we should strike some kind of like agreement here because there might be something to us actually owning that store, even though it's not where we wanted it to be physically. It'd be an opportunity for us to get into the business, to learn it at a lower entry point than just creating a brand from scratch. And so that I think led us naturally into like becoming now owners of Blerds Underground. We actually bought Chimera Comics in LaGrange and kept it from closing and have rebranded it to be Blerds Underground.
Wow.
Man, Mike need to give himself a little bit more credit. We came in that thing with a plan. It did.
That's true.
We ain't coming there like, we didn't come in there like, man, we're gonna get a store out this conversation, right? But we did know the transition was happening.
Yeah.
So a lot of those conversations, like me and Mike talked before, like how we wanted to go into it. And it was just about like the merchandise, really, you know, and because he needed somewhere to store it, and it was just gonna be all these different avenues, and even using that to like kind of field into the non-for-profit piece we was trying to get into initially. It just took a hard good left, right in the middle of the conversation, because whiskey does some things when you chatting, and it just got deep. And Mike is right, like the mindset was like, why close it? And we kind of leaned in on that. But like I said, those relationships, leveraging your relationships and the sincerity behind them is very important, because he knew how passionate we was about it. So he ain't even bat an eye. He was like, Dad, that sound, yeah. Like, and then it just kind of flowed from there.
And, you know, I just want to hint real quick on the power of relationships. You know, I mean, honestly, this podcast has happened because of power of relationships. You know, I've known both of y'all personally for years. And, you know, it's an honor that, you know, obviously y'all achieved this feat that I know y'all. But, you know, I think a lot of people don't really understand the magnitude of that. At least I didn't understand the magnitude of it until recently in my 30s, like I said a few minutes earlier. You know, y'all really achieved y'all dream. And not saying it couldn't have happened at all. You know, I'm sure it still possibly could have happened, but y'all had a streamlined way of achieving y'all dreams simply because of the power of relationships, right? Because y'all refused to, you know, have y'all ego collude, you know, in y'all minds. You know, y'all was like, you know what, we didn't win. It's cool. You know, a lot of people say, like, if you didn't win, like, you know what, F you, I'm gone. You know what I'm saying? But y'all still was like, you know what, let's build this bridge so that one day possibly we can cross it, and y'all crossed it, you know. And I think that's a very important lesson for a lot of people out there, regardless of their age, is utilize those relationships, man. Build those relationships for real, because I really feel like, I truly believe you can work hard all you want. You can be as creative as you want, but without relationships, you ain't going nowhere. Like, I truly believe that, especially in this world, man. Like, without relationships, you ain't going nowhere.
Absolutely. It's important. It's important to get into the business and to stay in business. I mean, like now that we're in it, all we're doing is networking. We've got librarians and school teachers and stuff coming in the store, and we're networking and talking to them about opportunities and looking at how we expand. I mean, the power of that relationship building is entrenched in being a small business owner. Like, it's the only way for you to survive. I think for a lot of us, it becomes it's difficult, right? Like taking that ego aside and being able to say, hey, I don't know the first thing about this business, but I'm willing to like ask. I'm willing to put myself out there. Because when dude told us, like I said, when he didn't select us and we got the initial shock of like, well, we didn't win, you know, it was never a thought to me like, well, that just gives up the idea. I think part of it too is like, when you have something like in our case, when we wrote down exactly what we wanted, when it becomes that real to you that you can see it. I mean, we could visualize what this store looked like before we even had it. Like it was so real to us. It's like you're willing to put ego aside or whatever else you have to do in order to see it come to fruition. Regardless of whether I won the essay competition, that store was too real for me when I got to imagine it, for me to just put myself before it and say, well, I'm not gonna reach out. I'm not gonna do this anymore because they didn't award it to me. It's like, no, I'll find a way to get this created now because I believe it's worth it, and I can't give up on it. So anyway, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. So, you know, that's the beauty of it. You know, y'all went for it. You know, like Sale said, whiskey obviously was a business partner in this process. And y'all got the store. Can we for a few minutes talk about some of the challenges? Because we say, okay, y'all got the store, like it's just okay, give me the keys. No, like, can we talk about some of the challenges of not only running a small business, but a comic book business? Because again, I don't think a lot of people understand when people think about comic books, they don't even think about money. They just think, like you said, Wolverine, Batman, whoop-de-doo. But what are some of the challenges that you guys had to overcome in these early stages of acquiring this business? But not only just that, but keeping it growing, keeping it going forward.
I would say one of the initial challenges when you like buying off of somebody that already has like their brand, how people receive like the look of that store, that location, like it has its own rep, whether it's good and bad stuff with it, right? And so trying to really rebrand something that's already in place in the vision of how we want to see it, right? And then also like the challenge of that is too, like we coming in, we still big dreamers, and we had to really take a step back and understand like, everything we want the store to look like, we can't do that in the time frame that we will really want to, right? And so like really enjoying the process of building on something else, and then people coming in and saying like, oh, this feel different, or this look different, or man, we love the way y'all run it, and things of that nature. So that was one of the initial challenges. And then the elephant in the room, it ain't really elephant. I mean, we didn't know up from down, to be honest. Like a lot of our stuff came from the people we purchased from, like their support and those learning curves, and some of the things that they were good at, we really leaned in on, and some of the things that they may have needed to work on, we had to learn. And you can't read the market either. You can, but you have to be really good with like numbers week to week and trends and what we think people gonna buy versus in the ordering process is what I'm talking to. It's like you can't predict it. It could look different in Hyde Park comic book store, what's trending there versus what trends in LaGrange, because these readers have very particular taste, right? It's specific to like who they are in their DNA, what appeals to them, and that looks different in different areas, so I would say those are some of the challenges, just surface level ones. But Mike, I know you got a few more.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, everything he just said is 100%, and I'd even echo like especially like when we bought the business, what people gotta understand is like we bought it 2 weeks before it was supposed to close. So,
so it was almost over with.
Yes, right. He had a closing sale already. He was advertising the store was closing. People were coming in, buying stuff off the shelf, expecting it to close. We bought the business 2 weeks before it was set to close. So we had 2 weeks to figure out how to switch all these licenses to our name, how the business works, how to make purchases, what are the point of sale systems, how do we get licenses to all the distributors. I mean, I could run a list of things that in 2 weeks we had to figure out. And then mind you, even though we had done all this preparation, I had done all this planning about what we wanted the store to act like and be and represent, the intricacies of like point of sale systems and how to order and manage inventory, all of that was foreign to us. So we came in like wanting to keep the store open so that there would be no gap from us taking over. And we had to learn a lot. We had to trust and learn how the staff, what staff was going to be there and how much we could trust them. Because the other thing that's been challenging that Sale didn't allude to yet is that balance. Because as you stated earlier, neither of us work the store full time. He and I both have careers. You know what I mean? Like
and families.
And families. And why, you know what I mean? So like our obligations outside the store keep us from being there every day. So we had to put a lot of trust into the staff that's there, that they could run and operate the store efficiently while we were transitioning. And that's been a huge challenge too, because without our staff, we wouldn't have been able to do this. So I got to give a big shout out to our staff because they've kept us running. I mean, we made a hire, and one guy, Kevin, who's been amazing, but we kept on some staff that was working the store before, and they've helped fill the gap for us while we learn more about the business, because he and I aren't there 24/7. We're there as much as we can be, but that's been a big part of this too, is just learning what balance looks like for us now.
Yeah, and that's huge, like you said, the staff, because in all businesses is always the front line to keep the businesses afloat, and so definitely, it's a great thing that they received you guys well, and you guys had that trust in them to keep this ship going, and so it doesn't sink in that transitional phase. I did not know that it was 2 weeks away from closing, though. I did not know that. I just thought it was his intention to close it, and then that's when the deal started coming through. But wow, yeah, y'all definitely got in right before right before it was night. So you guys took full ownership in fall 2022. So with that being said, you haven't had ownership of the store yet throughout a major comic book theatrical release. The MCU. The DCU. I mean, I feel like Black Adam came out like maybe around the same time, and what was the other movie? Black Panther, right? Wakanda Forever. I mentioned this because like how much of an influence do the movies have on comic book sales? So like when a new movie comes out in the industry, does it trend upward that comic books sell more? Like how does that work?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So, like I say, it's hard to predict, but does it pique their interest? For sure. Black Adam was out, like we had people buying a little bit more of the Black Adams. Even some of my closest friends, like, man, I want to know what this character about, man. Let me what's a graphic novel you recommend? So does the store need to kind of move in the way cinema is moving, right? Like the movies. Yes, I would say if it's a Black Panther coming out, if it's a Black Adam coming out, when Ant-Man coming out, we gonna have Ant-Man like sections and things of that nature. It's just a smart move because if you notice, the reason why it's popular now, like, and it's cool to be into anime and it's cool to be into comics, is because the movies have normalized like just that stuff being appealing through a great execution and artful execution of like who these characters are. So yes, you gotta stay with where it's trending, but you also got to be aware like these true comic book people, they don't care what dang on coming out, they gonna get the stories that hit with them. So you're not having people that's really into Black Adam getting Black Adam comics just because they gonna be buying Black Adam from year 1 to year 5 if they really love the character. But for people that's not as into comic books, a kid will stop on the dime and see a character that they saw on a cartoon in the window. Oh, mom, that's Black Panther, or oh, that's Captain America, and they will stop. Sometimes they'll just come in like, do you have any, of this? So it's kind of like, stay ready so you ain't got to get ready type mentality, right? Like I know a movie coming out. All right, no, I'm gonna set up that section of the store.
Yep. And just real quick too, while we're talking about movies and the power and the impact of movies, that's actually part of what inspired us to think about becoming owners of a store. For me, at least, I remember when we were first going through the idea for this is when Black Panther's first movie came out.
Okay.
And I was thinking about the experience for the first time. One of the biggest blockbuster selling movies of Marvel's history was Black Panther 1. Broke all sorts of records, right? And I was thinking, like, of all the millions that movie made, the Black film crew, the directors, and all the actors, it was great to see. But then you saw all this interest in Black Panther's character. And I started thinking about all the comics that were sold, the merchandise, how you seeing kids showing up, Halloween dressed as Black Panther and throwing you the Wakanda Forever symbol. And I started thinking, like, while I appreciate and I'm glad that all the money from the movie went to Black producers and directors and actors and actresses, all of the subsequent trickle down money that went to the comics, the merchandise, and the toys and all that were going to stores predominantly owned by white men. I mean, we talked about comic book stores. And so for me, it was more like how, even though these stories are becoming more diverse and we're starting to see, Black superheroes on film more and more often, how much of those dollars from their comics, their merchandise, the trademarks are getting put into Black businesses. And the truth is hardly any. And so that to me was a big reason too for what we're doing, is like, we're trying to now capitalize from the movie and all of the merchandise that's being sold, so that it doesn't just stop at the movie and the actors and actresses, that we can actually put businesses in our neighborhoods to also, generate some wealth from all of that excitement and that buzz around seeing us represented on screen.
Yeah, and that's a huge point, because it's like, think about it, the movies are only popular because the comics made them popular, and now the comics are popular because the movies so it's like a full circle event. And it's like, so it just comes right back to the same square root, which is, there is no Black ownership on the comic book level or the merchandising level, and so that's why it's like so, refreshing that you guys had the courage to go forward and do what you do. Because Marcell, you mentioned the comic book store in Hyde Park. Honestly, that's not only is it the only comic book store I see, but I don't see no other comic book stores really, because my mind isn't really affixed to see comic book stores like that. Maybe it's because I'm not a true blerd, but that was really the only one I ever saw.
Well, no, not to interrupt you, but I think this is a really, really good point that you're making. I want to just drill into a little bit. That perception that you have is very real, because a lot of comic book stores don't exist in Chicago, in their neighborhoods where we're at. The Hyde Park location for First Aid Comics, for those listening, is not Black owned, but it's in a Black neighborhood. So for many of us who were into this, that's where we had to travel to get books if we weren't going to the suburbs. For me personally, every comic book store that I had to go to when I was a kid was in Oak Lawn or Evergreen Park or some other predominantly white, suburb. So when we talk about like perception and why Black kids aren't into it, I talk to people all the time about this, because they say, when I tell them my goal, or our goal, is to like have a store on the Southside, they say, well, Black kids aren't really into that. And I've heard this from people, like, we don't do that. Black kids don't do that. And my thing is like, not only do we do it, the reason why you don't see it and others don't see it and perceive it that way is because we've never had a store in our neighborhood that's
never had that space. Never had
exactly. They don't exist. So it's like, it's easy to write it off and say, well, Black kids aren't into this because we don't give them the outlets. We don't give them the space where they can go and express that creativity in their neighborhoods without having to go to Hyde Park, for instance. So no, I just wanted to make that point, because that's important.
Yeah, real talk, because that's really all I'll ever see. So the fact that you guys have this in LaGrange, it's a west suburb, but nonetheless, we got something. And I say we as in the Black community, we got something. I mean, it's just the facts. And I was just real curious on how the trends worked with the movies, because again, the comics are the reason why the movies even became a thing in the first place. And honestly, that's why a lot of people know about the comics now, is because of the movies. So it's just like that full circle, spectrum. So yeah, like, we're in January now as we record this, and Marvel has a huge slate coming out. I think it's Phase 6, starting with Ant-Man. I think Loki season 2 is coming out this summer, and so on and so on. So it's like going to be very interesting to see how those trends go. So with that being said, like, what are some goals? Have you guys even talked about some concrete goals for 2023 for the store? Like some things that you guys would like to see achieved with Blerds Underground?
Yeah, so it's a couple of things. I know
you ain't got to reveal no confidential stuff.
No. I mean, we want to do a community. We want to do an event per quarter. I know we talked about that, like making sure that we keep events on the forefront, in terms of, this is more than just a store. It's a space where you can, have a good time. It's a space where you could do different things. I know, at least for this year, 2023, like, I definitely think programming for kids need to be part of what we're doing. And I know we already looking into like sponsoring some schools, and also using all this extra, inventory that we have to do some programs in schools that's not, in LaGrange. So both like schools in LaGrange, but also, I work at a school, so like I would be remiss if I didn't like double back and do kind of like an arts program with the kids, and kind of hang their stuff up in the store and things of that nature. But that's just to be honest, a lot of the stuff that we are going to do this year is testing the field, right? We need to see what appeals to kids that look like us. Kids are into it. They draw it all day. They got anime, mangas, all that stuff up. I'm talking about, it don't matter what school you go to. That's what kids are drawing. That's what they creating. You got some great writers. So really tapping into those skill sets of the youth, seeing what they're interested in, see what they bought into, and then how do we push that forward once we figure it out. But for me personally, I would love to at least have one sample size of kid, output and creativity, and how do we harness that and do it in different settings.
That'd be amazing.
2020.
Yeah, and one other thing I can share, I can reveal to you all listening only. This is an exclusive for SoCHiology.
Exclusive.
Exclusive. No, we want to partner with artists and writers. So we're going to be doing some community focused events where we have artists, illustrators like Eve Ewing, who's a very popular writer right now for Marvel. Black woman, Southside Chicago, born and raised, wrote for Ironheart, is written now for Photon. We're going to be trying to reach out to her and her people to do, some sort of art event for us and signing events. Because what we want to do is we want to link together the creatives. Chicago has a huge creative scene. There are a lot of writers, animators, and artists that come out of Chicago, and you just would never know, right? And so what we want to do is get them in front of kids to say, like, if this is a path that you want to go down, like, there's a way you can make a career out of it. We want to build programming around the idea of ownership, even at their age, so that they can start to see their content, even at their young age, on shelves next to the big Marvels and DCs of the world. Like, I want to make sure that that's an important part of the programming that we do this year. We're also for Free Comic Book Day, which is a huge event for those not familiar with comics. Okay. May 6th, it's May 6th this year, but once a year, all of the publishers do this huge free comic day, and they partner with all the stores like ours to get all these exclusive comics in stores and give them away for free for people who are coming in.
Wow, I never knew about that.
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
Okay,
huge deal. Every store gets a ton of inventory for Marvel and DC, and they print a book for all your favorite characters that you can do, that we as a store give away for free. And it's a chance for people to get an entry point into comics. Like, if you haven't been a huge fan, but you want to start someplace, a lot of #1s come out on Free Comic Book Day, a lot of background stories on characters you didn't know about. So, and it's a way for you to just get a collection of books for free, basically, from any store that you can get to. And different stores will have different books. So we're going to do a huge event for that. It's May 6th. We'll be doing a huge event at the store, and we've got a ton of inventory we're already ordering, and t-shirts and giveaways that we're going to do for that. So those are two big things that we're going to do within this year for the business.
That sounds exciting. And again, because I never, my mind was never fixed to comic book stores, I never knew about that, and that's huge. And that's, again, like you made the comment about how someone said, oh, Black kids don't, read comics, which we know is false. But right. Like, that's something that's never been exposed to Black kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, can you imagine, like, if that was exposed on the South and the West side of Chicago, like, how many kids will take advantage of that?
I mean, it's about access. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To be honest, like, the kids want it, but what store can they go to grab it? Exactly. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And who's gonna actually, so like, if you ain't got no means of transportation, how are you gonna get to a LaGrange or to an Evergreen or to an Oak Lawn? You know what I'm saying? Like,
right. Yeah. So when we bought the store in LaGrange, one of the things Marcell and I talked about being intentional about was making sure that we were a mobile store. Like, we want to operate and service the people of LaGrange. It's a great community, but our original mission to make comics more accessible isn't going anywhere. What we want to do is create a vehicle that allows us to go into schools, like Marcell was saying, that are on the South and West sides, partner with libraries, partner with special events that are happening within those communities to get the books that we have sitting in inventory. Because we've got a ton of books that aren't even in the store. We got storage lockers now of books. Like, there's so much content out there that we amass. And so rather than sitting on it, we want to get it out, make it mobile, take it to fairs, take it to book fairs, and take it to schools so that we can get it in the hands of the kids that need it. until such a time that we can maybe expand the store, because part of our goal in this isn't to stop Blerds Underground at just one store in LaGrange. We want to build a franchise out of this. We want there to be multiple locations. So in the future, you might see a Blerds Underground in your neighborhood if you're on the south side of Chicago. That's the eventual goal.
Man, that's crazy that like y'all got storage lockers full of like content, you know. So y'all like Pablo Escobar, you know, y'all just got, y'all got bricks everywhere.
I mean, bro, we just went to a store that like blew our mind a few days ago. Yeah, it's nonstop, man. It's so much history behind like this platform. Like it's so many books, man. We even in our storage locker, like we just scratching the surface. We probably 2000s up. You know what I mean? It's this, you know, but it's boxes and boxes of it, and it's nonstop. Like, man, we was like kids in the candy store going through books for hours, and we wasn't even reading them. It was just like, man, all right, we looking for stuff to take back to the store. So just imagine, like, we took a few kids like to that, and just like, look, just go through it, pick out about 10 books, just figure out how their eyes will get big, just trying to find a book that appeals to them the most.
It's like Christmas. It's like Christmas Day, Christmas morning. You know, that's what it's. That's a Blerds paradise right there. You know, for real. For real. You know, so also I just want to hint real quick about the podcast y'all got, Blerds. You know, Blerds is the word. You know, are we gonna see a resurgence of that possibly, maybe, and how that can intertwine with the store? Probably not. No.
No. Shoot. Don't get me going on Blerds the word. I know that's Mike and our boy Jeff, as y'all know. I love the platform. I'm love that I was even invited to do it. Like that's why I don't miss any episodes. It's therapy, like literally for us, because we get to talk about things that we love with this platform, but we also get to kind of like, you know, fellowship with each other.
Yes.
Oh, and I think that's the biggest part. And I think that's the part that appeals to like the people that do watch, because you could tell like, oh man, these dudes kind of get along.
Like they actually like, you know, it's not just for show.
Yeah. So you Mike already know, like I'm always asking, bro, we need to do this like every 2 weeks.
You on it. Hey, look, I might be one of the co-hosts, but Captain Kirk is the driving motive. Like he will get us rallied around like getting on the, because it's hard. You know, you have a podcast. I'm sure you understand. Like it's hard managing just a few schedules. When you talk about trying to get 5 or 6 brothers who all have careers, families, etc., into a room to talk, it is difficult. But not only have we brought Blerds the Word back, which for those listening, Blerds the Word is a podcast with a bunch of black Blerds that just get together and talk about whatever's in the culture, whether that's a movie, a TV show, a comic, whatever. We just discuss it all. Now, we were doing that from my basement for years. I mean, we just in the basement, and we didn't know the first thing about throwing up a podcast. It was just all trial and error. What surprised me is how quickly people started to listen and spread the word, to the point where like we were getting people like out on the street. Like I'd run into people who are like, man, I listen to your podcast, Blerds the Word. And I'm like, I had no idea that there were that many of us to take notice, to share, but it's become like this huge thing. But what happened is I was a huge fan of this show back in the day, AMC's Comic Book Men show. It was like just a group of white guys who owned a comic book store. Kevin Smith would come by and they would talk about like different collections people bought in and stuff like that. And it came on after The Walking Dead, so I would always stay up, watch that, and just for, you know, kicks and giggles. But I said, if I ever got a chance, I would love to do a podcast in the store I own, right? So now Blerds the Word is coming to you officially from the Blerds Underground. So when we set up and we're doing our recording for the podcast, we're doing it in the store. It's like living out one of my fantasies right now, because like we're discussing the culture in an environment and a space that we own. It's nothing I love doing more than that.
Can't beat that, man. That's amazing. It's literally a dream come true, you know. And this is such a huge blessing that you guys are experiencing right now. And you know, I'm happy for y'all, like real talk, because you got Blerds is the word, Blerds Underground, you know, Blerds World, you know, the sky's the limit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You know, the sky's the limit, man, for real. So yeah, that's all of this is dope, man. You know, I was so I had 3 questions, and as y'all was talking, more was coming to me. So technically I have 6 questions for y'all. We're gonna wrap up the podcast with these 6 questions. Now, each question is I ain't gonna say each one, but a couple of them are loaded. So I know a couple of them y'all gonna have something to say. You know what I'm saying? So we just gonna start off basic. Mike, you go first. Who is your favorite comic book character ever? Just one.
Superman. I said it earlier. He is to me one of the most interesting characters I've read, and who I would like to one day acquire the powers from.
Okay. Marcell?
Right now, Miles Morales.
So Spider, but the Miles Morales specific Spider-Man. Okay. Why that one specifically?
I mean, culturally relevant. It really captures the sincerity, like what it means to be like a teenager, but also a teenager of color. On top of, it gives a different, it's almost like they redid the Spider-Man origin, made it current for, kids. I would say will be appealing to all kids, all shapes, sizes, and colors. But for me reading it, I'm looking like, man, when they say let go, let God on the panel, like, what? Like, that's something like your grandma, your aunt would say to you. You know what I mean? That joint hit different. And so reading Miles Morales right now, like as an adult man, all I want to do is I bought like 3-4 copies. Like, I'm giving this to you, because I just want kids to like feel that, like, dang, man, like this. They talking like they said, nah, like all that.
right, yeah.
I can hear it in my head. Miles Morales right now is like probably one of my favorite characters created in the last 20 years.
Okay, so Superman and Miles Morales, Spider-Man. All right, next question. What is an underrated comic book story arc, regardless of Marvel, DC, doesn't matter, but what's an underrated comic book story arc you feel deserves more attention? You can go first, Sal.
Oh, you just hit me over the head.
I told you I had him locked and loaded.
For me, X-Men Second Coming was it's one of the best X-Men stories to me. They locked in I don't want to get too deep, but essentially mutants go down from millions of people part of their species to 198, give or take. And then they isolate them to San Francisco, put a dome over the whole city. I'm talking about over and under. Nobody can get in. And the only thing that gets in is people trying to assassinate and take out like the rest of their people. And like the resiliency that they had to show in like that story arc after all the stuff they've been through, right? Like they had to fight for days, had people scheduled to fight hours and hours on end by people trying to eliminate this. Like that joint, like what it took for the heroes that, you grew up watching on cartoons, like, yo, these mods got some layers to them. It wasn't just the fighting, it was the planning around. It was really good. And then the people that died in it hit home. It hit hard.
Sounds like worse than Days of Future Past. Like,
bro,
that sounds messed up. Look, X-Men be having some depressing ass shit, man. But it's real though. Like it's real because like it really relates to like, oppression and genocide and all that stuff that people of color had to endure. So I'm gonna check it out. I never heard of that one. I'm gonna check it out.
Second Coming. Check it out.
Thank you for educating me. Mike, your turn.
It's tough, man. There's so many I think that don't get recognized, and I'll say this as a broader point. I think we get too attached to brands like DC and Marvel. One of the things that I'm into is indie comics. Like I really love some of the indies out there, like Saga, Philadelphia, A Vicious Circle. There's a ton of content that's on independent publishing brands that's really well drawn, well written, but just doesn't have the major Marvel or DC stamp on it that gets overlooked. So if I'm asked that question, personally, I throw one out that I'm reading right now called Philadelphia. This guy, Rodney Barnes, who wrote, if you all are watching the show Wu-Tang, the American Saga, he wrote that. He's written for American Gods and some other things. The guy's amazing, but he's writing a story right now about the city of Philadelphia, about a Black detective who discovers that there's this underground cult of vampires that are living in and around Philadelphia, and they're plotting to overthrow the government. And it's a Black story. It's really well drawn, well written, and it's just not as popular because again, it's on an indie label. So what I would tell folks listening is, if you want to dive into some good storytelling, don't limit yourself to the characters that you might know from the big screen. Like, go to some of those indie walls and look around, because you might find some of the stuff like Walking Dead, for instance. The Walking Dead was a popular TV show, but before that, it was a very popular manga that sat on shelves that people might have walked past if they didn't know any better. So just familiarize yourselves with it. Ask the folks at the store and see what indie titles are popping right now, because a lot of those are better written, in my opinion, than some of the stuff that's coming out the major labels.
Okay, Philadelphia. I'm gonna check that out. I'm gonna check that out, as well as X-Men Second Coming. So thank you too for that. All right, the next one. Who will win in a fight, Hulk or Doomsday?
That's a tough one. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Hulk. Even though I love Doomsday Story, it's one of my most popular Superman titles. I will say Hulk only because his ability to get stronger the angrier he gets, and especially if you get into like the later years of Hulk, when he becomes intelligent and on his own. That intelligence plus his strengths, to me, makes him a much more adversary than Doomsday, who's never really been that intelligent. From my and like, in this issue, he was a brilliant scientist. Like, you might get me, but that's why I give it to the Hulk. So what do you think?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because Doomsday evolves as he fights too. You know what I mean? Like, he adjusts. Hulk, I want to say Hulk. I'm gonna go with Hulk. I'm gonna go with the Green Machine.
2-0, 2-0. Okay, 2-0. All right. I'm gonna say this one for last. All right. So I'll be remiss if I didn't mention The Dark Knight, because it was filmed in Chicago. This is SoCHiology, and we have the Blerds on the episode. So The Dark Knight was filmed in Chicago. What was y'all favorite scene from The Dark Knight?
Oh, easily for me. It was that chase scene they did in Lower Wacker, bro. Like, that was so Chicago. Because number one, I've always been scared anytime I hit Lower Wacker Drive. Like, that's one of the most terrifying things about living in Chicago, is if you end up in Lower Wacker and you on navigation.
Tourists call it the tunnel. They was like, yeah, I got trapped in the tunnel. I'm like, yeah, I get trapped in the tunnel too. So it happened.
Yes. No, but that scene was amazing. Like having Joker come out with that rocket launcher, and he's like trying to shoot a rocket at Batman when his Batmobile turns into a bat cycle and stuff. That scene was amazing to me. That's probably my favorite of that saga.
Probably Joker for sure. The scene you named, Mike, that's definitely my favorite, like, action scene from the movie. But when the dialogue in there, when he was checking up how the criminals, like, he was getting them in order, like, yo, like,
a year ago,
y'all care about money too much.
Yeah.
The scene.
Oh yeah, when he burnt the money, he was like, "It's not about money." Yeah.
He put that pencil on the joint, right? Like, he put the pencil on the table, and then he slammed Buddy head like on the pencil, and like just put him to bed, like, go to sleep. And it was kind of like everybody in that room looked at him like, yo, this dude moves much different. It set the tone for the movie, like, yo.
Yeah,
that opening was killer too.
Yeah, my favorite shot was when it was on LaSalle, and you had the border trade in the background. It's just, that was just so iconic to me. Like, I'm like, wow, like Mike said with the Wacker Drive, I'm like, this is some Chicago shit right here. Like, it's one of those things, like, if you know, like, like, what I'm saying? Yeah, like, yeah. That was a good one. That was a good one. Okay, so let's see. We got two more. All right, so Mike, you actually answered this question already, so I'm gonna go straight to Sale. Sale, what would be your superpower? Because Mike said he would want to be Superman. So if you had the option to choose any superpower, any ability, what would you pick?
Probably something versatile, like I love telekinesis, man. I just love the whole being able to stop stuff with your mind, and I will go with that.
Okay. So we got Captain Kirk with the telekinesis, the Don. Can you imagine a mafia Don with Superman powers? Like it's a good thing Michael Corleone didn't have that ability. Like, he would have like just never stopped. He never would have stopped. Okay, all right, cool. So the last question, which is, obviously is always going to be asked. I'm sure y'all get asked this a million times in y'all regular lives, but y'all gonna answer it once more. When it comes down to it, when the chips are down, Marvel or DC? When the chips are down, who
I favor Marvel. I know I do. As I've grown, of course, I've been leaning towards some DC stuff, but my heart of hearts, Marvel is what got me started. Half of my collection was X-Men and Spider-Man, so I got an affinity towards those characters for sure. So I would say Marvel.
That's tough. That question gives me a lot of trouble on the podcast. Blurs the word. I will. It's complicated, man. I can say Marvel when we talk movies and DC when we talk comics. To me, DC has better comic storylines. Some of my favorite stories, Kingdom Come and Infinity Crisis, and I can name just a short list of others. Like DC has a lot of great storytelling in the comics that don't always translate well to the movies. Marvel has a ton of comics, ton of storylines. They're not all that great. There's some that are really great, and then they have amazing movies. So for me, if you had to pin me to one, I would probably pick Marvel just because of the movies and the amount of content. But I don't want to discount DC. If you read their comics, man, they got some amazing writers over at DC.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the animated films I've seen from DC are very solid. Like,
great,
very solid. Like the story, it's kind of like how y'all can do this, but y'all can't do that. Like,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like the writing be damn near Oscar worthy in those animated films. But y'all look, I mean, I can say this because it's my podcast. Y'all don't have to agree. Y'all don't have to say nothing. But I feel like Black Adam was trash. Okay, the action was amazing. The action was amazing though, and I feel like that's why they had The Rock. But it's just I feel like the writing was like really mid-tier. And again, that's just my opinion. Y'all ain't got to speak on that because I know
it was. It was more entertaining than what I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be trash before I even walked in the theater. And it was like, oh man, it's kind of entertaining. I didn't expect much. It's kind of like benefit from that. Yeah. The action was in it. The story wasn't amazing, but and The Rock wasn't compelling. It was just like, man, these
just being himself.
Yeah, he was just being Dwayne.
I feel like at one point he thought Triple H was gonna come out or something.
Bro.
Like,
hey, The Rock, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm gonna be me. I'm making bucks, man, and I'm gonna do this in every opportunity I get.
Yeah, me and my mom went to see it, and like my mom, obviously she don't know shit about shit. She just likes action. But it's bad when somebody who don't know shit about shit, they just want to see a movie. Was like, yeah, I don't see movies like this. I'm like, yeah. Yeah. She just wanted to go see action. She ain't care about nothing else. And when she said that, I'm like, damn, it's bad. It's bad.
That's what irritates me about DC because it can do some great action sequences and stuff like that, but the writing has, to me, in their movies sucks so bad when they have such great source material. You talk about them animated movies, man, like some of the best written content that translate to animated films that are just great. The animated series like Justice League, great. Even some of their TV shows, like I watched what's the one, Titans.
Good.
Yeah.
Like great shows, but just cannot adapt that to film for some reason. I don't understand. Although I will make some notable exceptions. Joker was good, really great. I thought that
first Wonder Woman was good. The first Superman under Zack Snyder was good. Aquaman wasn't bad. It was decent.
Now it's turned into a Blurs the Word episode. Now let's not.
We're gonna say that for y'all forum. Yeah. So yeah, just to wrap up, man. Like, is there anything else y'all want to add? The fact that y'all really achieved this goal, and obviously it's not over with. Y'all still want to keep pushing, keep ascending. Like, what else would you like to tell those out there listening? About this journey, and it's just about the comic book world as a whole, as a Black person, Black man, Black woman.
I think that as much emphasis as we put in our community on understanding our past and understanding our history, I think it should be equally important that we imagine our future. And the best way to imagine our future is to think about fantasy. What has not been done, what could be created. I think from that perspective, I just would encourage anyone that's listening that has an interest in learning more about fiction whether it's through the medium of comics or manga or just, novels or TV shows, movies, to just, allow your mind to go there and ask yourself, like, what would a future a fictional character look like in my image, right? Like, just allow yourself to explore and encourage your kids too. I mean, like, I tell people all the time, like, for me, fiction was never as encouraged, right? It was like one of those things people expect you to grow out of at some point. If you got a kid, somebody who's growing up that's interested in that, let them lean into it. There's a creative side to everything that we do, whether it's in business or in our personal lives. That creativity is as important as, learning reading and math and arithmetic to me. Like, just investing in creativity, imagination and fantasy is hugely important. Then the last thing I'll say real quick before I turn it over is, like, if you're in the Chicagoland area, come buy from us. Like, come to the store. The Blerds Underground is located 15.5 South LaGrange Road. I know it's weird having a half an address, but it is what it is. 15.5 South LaGrange Road in LaGrange, Illinois. Come shop, see the store, give us your feedback. If you have a cousin, an uncle, somebody that has a collection, we buy collections. Tell them to bring their books in. We'll buy them. We'll sell them. But if you got a kid that's going to see the movie, you want to pick up a comic for them or whatever, we sell toys, we sell action figures. Come and check us out. Come and shop for us. Support what we're trying to do. And last but not least, man, I just want to thank you, Twiz. It's been a great. Our friendship goes back almost 10 years plus now at this point. It's been great seeing your success. As a podcast host, as a photographer, a videographer, a best-selling author, and everything else that you've accomplished, man. I'm enormously proud of you, my brother, and I thank you for sharing your platform with us.
Thank you.
All right. I don't know. I always think about this line from This Is Us. He was talking about how we saw life as, like, kids, right? And we saw it as, for example, if a 5-year-old brought you a drawing and they was drawing a whole 50-year life, right? They just was some draws, they was killing it, and they just trying to show you pictures and they trying to show you these images that they created. You think about the molding that happens. That's 20% of their life, right? 20% of their life at 5, right? And it's as we get older, the less we tend to dream, or things don't move as slow for us because we live so much life. And so, like, really capitalizing on, like, what Mike was saying, like, we got kids around us all the time that's trying to show us something, trying to give us an entryway to what they're doing or what they're interested in. It doesn't have to be drawing, it doesn't have to be comics, but it's something. You know what I mean? Like, how are we embracing that? And a lot of parts of what make this store intriguing for me, I know it's a lot of youth out there that's just looking for somebody to look at their picture in a non-dismissive way, whatever that picture is, So really channeling that part is important, but also, looking at you, Twiz, me, and Mike, like, we simply are doing things that we care about. And if anybody gonna take anything away from, like, this conversation, it's really not about the store per se, even though that's why we're on this platform right now. It's more about, like, how we got to this point just from doing us. Right? Like, like, we're really just here because we're doing something that brings us comfort and that has brought us comfort. And we always stuck with it. Whether it was going to give us some results that's financial or not, like, we still can stand here very happy. Investment that we made, no matter where it lands. Do we got big old dreams? Heck yeah, you know what I mean? But that part, living out, is cool, but just doing it, like, right now means 10 times as much, because it's kind of like, step out and do something that you care about. And don't care about, like, the outcomes of it. Care about, like, that first step, and be cool with it and embrace it and nurture it the same way we look forward for those kids that I was telling y'all about earlier. Like, you're gonna show it to somebody gonna look at that picture and they're gonna be like, dang, like how can I invest in this? You know what I mean? How can I push this? But I really encourage people to do that for the little ones that's around them. You never know what's gonna come of that for them. And if you got a little brother or a little sister or somebody that you mentor, treat it the same way as that. And it's to the sentiments Mike gave as well. Twiz, like it's really amazing. Like I'm looking at all three of our faces on the screen. It's pretty cool. That people sit in a small room, AES meetings and all that stuff, and partying together on Thursday night socials and all that stuff. Getting to a point where all of our passions connect. Like that's pretty damn dope. Like to watch Twiz from afar and then watch him in action, even your interviewing skills, bro. Like you thorough. Amazing dude, man. So thank you for having us on this platform as well.
Thank you, fellas. I appreciate y'all, man. Captain Marcell Kirk and Michael the Don Davis.
Blerds Underground is located at 15.5 South LaGrange Road in LaGrange, Illinois. So whenever you get a chance, stop by, check them out, buy a comic or two. And if you can't get there physically, no worries. They do have a website, which I included in this episode description. So if you like this episode, please pass it on to somebody else that may benefit from it as well and may enjoy it. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or whatever platform you're listening to it on right now. If you enjoyed this podcast, whatever platform you're listening to it on right now, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, etc., leave a 5-star review and a comment. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to our sister podcast, Mogul Motivation, from True Stories Media.